Morning, TFH Oakland. My name is Derica, and I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in today. I hope everyone had a great week because we are about to have a great Sunday. If you are new to this church, thank you so much for joining us. You can leave a comment below what your name so we know who you are. And after the message, we have something called the lobby where you can get to know us, get connected, be friends, be part of our family, see what your next steps are, and just hang out and have a great time. Hey, if this is your home church, I want to thank you guys so much for being generous. And don't forget, the ways to give are on the app or online in the link. You can find it below as well. Well, we're about to step into a time of worship, so I'll see you guys after.
Perfection. There's no need in me pretending. I'll give you everything. I'll give you everything. You deserve my full attention. Nothing less than my devotion. Speak to me and I will listen. I'll give you everything. I'll give you everything. Whoa, whoa. You can have my heart. You can have my. Sing it again. Whoa, whoa. You can have my heart. You can have my. Sing whoa, whoa. You can have my heart. You can have my. From selfish motive, search me till there's nothing hidden, and I'll give you everything. I'll give you. Sing on. Whoa, whoa. You can have my heart. You can have my. You can have my heart. You can have my heart. Sing Jesus. Jesus, Jesus. You can have my heart. Here it is. Here it is. Sing Jesus. Jesus, Jesus. You can have my. Sing, oh, sing, oh, oh, My heart is yours completely. My heart is yours. My life is yours. My will is yours. It's yours, it's yours. You can have it. 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 Oh, you can have my heart. You can have my heart. Oh, you can have my heart. You can have my heart. It never ends, it never ends, it never ends, God. It's jealous for me. It's jealous for me. It's jealous for me. What a love, what a love, what a love. What a magnificent love. What a beautiful love. It's a beautiful love. It's jealous for me. You're jealous for me. Oh, what a love. Oh, what a love. What a love. He loves us. Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves. Oh, how He loves. What a love, what a love, what a love. What a beautiful love. What a beautiful love. What a beautiful love. You keep coming for me. He loves, He loves. Oh, how He loves us. You never stop loving. Oh, how you call us yours, yeah, you love us. Call us yours. Call us yours. Call us yours. We are your children. We are yours. We are yours. Call us yours. Call us yours. Oh, to be loved by you. To be loved by you. To be loved by you, Jesus. To be loved by you, Jesus. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. To be loved by the King. To be loved by the King. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. To be loved by the King. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. To be loved by the King. To be loved by you. To be loved by you. Oh, to be loved by you. 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 Oh, how He loves us. Oh, how He loves. To be loved by the King. He loves us.
Good morning, TFH Oakland. Pastor Jules here. Excited to be with you as we are concluding our series in Lethal. If this is your first time joining us, thank you so much. My name is Jules Moore. I'm so happy that you're here with us. Thank you for tuning in. I love the engagement. Feel free to jump into the comments or wherever you're watching. Feel free to let us know where you are signing on from, and we would love to connect with you. Feel free to be a part of our lobby. I do want to highlight something extremely important to us, which is our small groups. Our small groups are pretty much the glue of the church. It holds us together. It's our community. And small groups have actually doubled, which has been incredible. In the middle of a pandemic, we've actually multiplied. And it's amazing to see all of the different leaders that are jumping in and opening up their Zoom rooms for you to come in and engage and hang out. And so that's a great opportunity. So feel free to go to the website, check out, get connected. And we would love to be able to host a small group for you to join. Or if you're interested in that, feel free to check that out. But small groups, man, let's do life together. Family is truly everything, and that's a part of our mission. It's who we are, and so we want to live life with you. And so with that being said, we're jumping into our text this morning, and actually I want to kind of jump between two texts and highlight something that I think is extremely lethal to our lives. I don't know if you're familiar, but there's this four-letter word that rocks our lives. It's a challenging four-letter word. People use it to get out of certain things. People use it because it's a reality. I believe everyone has had a taste of it. And before your mind gets too crude, I'm talking about pain. Pain is something that we've all experienced. And we're in a moment in our time of life where pain just seems to be all around us. If you think about it, I feel like people are experiencing so much trauma right now. And how did Jesus live within that constant pain, almost chronic pain, or walking through challenging seasons? And I think if pain is not put in its proper place, it can be extremely lethal to our lives. Pain can actually function as something that can propel us, that can push us into our purpose. Or pain can be extremely lethal and devastating if it goes on unchecked. And Jesus lived such an incredible life. That's why we follow Jesus, just because from the beginning of time, God had put an inkling, an indicator. He put a neon sign pointing that one day his son would come and begin to restore humanity's fallen state. And in light of all that's going on, from jury trials and protests, we see that humanity has definitely fallen. And we need Jesus. We need a life that we can look at as an example that shines brighter than the darkness, that gives us hope and shows us how do we walk through moments of excruciating pain and those that are in our lives that actually could be the cause of that pain. And Jesus unpacks that for us. And this is a familiar text because we've talked about this. We've read this for the last couple of weeks. And this is in Matthew 16. And then we're going to go a little bit deeper into Matthew. And we're going to look at these two people, one by the name of Peter and one by the name of Judas. Which these people are so extremely interesting is because Peter is someone that walked with God, that is known to have loved God and been with God. And Judas is known as a man that has betrayed Jesus. But the irony of this, and something that strikes me, very peculiar, is how come Jesus chose to walk with these two men? And at some point, both of them had betrayed him, but Jesus had two different responses to them. Jesus' response, harsh, very harsh, to what we're about to read as we jump into Matthew chapter 16. And Matthew 16 reads like this, verses 22 or 21. It says this: "From then on, Jesus began to tell his disciples plainly that it was necessary for him to go to Jerusalem, and that he would suffer many terrible things at the hands of the elders and the leading priests and the teachers of religious law. He would be killed, but on the third day, he would be raised from the dead." But Peter took him aside and began to reprimand him for saying such things. "Heaven forbid, Lord," he said, "this will never happen to you." And Jesus turned to Peter and said, "Get away from me, get behind me, Satan. You are a dangerous trap to me. You are seeing things merely from a human point of view, not from God's view." If you didn't get a chance to watch last week's sermon, we talked about boundaries 2.0, and the toxicity that can spill over to our lives that can actually rob us of visibility, of being able to see God clearly for where he's taking us. And here we see Jesus remind Peter that he is a distraction from the plan of God. He's saying, I know that pain is on the other side, But I cannot avoid this pain. I must go through this pain. And Peter, if you are a stumbling block to me, you are actually operating under the guide of Satan and satanic forces. And Peter, friend of Jesus, Jesus checks him. In the words of the great prophet Ice Cube, check yourself before you wreck yourself, because I'm bad for your health. And Jesus says, Peter, you're out of pocket. I thought that was funny. You don't have to think that was funny. Ice Cube, I love Ice. Anyway, moving on. Jesus goes on, and a few days later, Jesus is sitting with his disciples, and he's breaking bread with them. And he's actually at this culminating point where he's about to go to the cross. And he's having his last meal. And Jesus goes, while they were eating, he said, I tell you the truth that one of you will betray me. Greatly distressed, each one asked in turn, am I the one, Lord? He replied. Now think about this. So Jesus has just literally checked Peter. They've gone on this journey. Miracles are still happening. The triumphant entry. He begins to weep over Jerusalem, and Jesus' heart breaks for his community. He sees the brokenness in his community, and his heart begins to just overflow with compassion. And he's sitting down with his disciples, these men that he has spent the last 3 years of life with. They have eaten together. They have lived life together. They have fought together. They have fought each other. They have literally gone through so many different things. And yet Jesus is having this meal with him, and he begins to tell them that one of you will betray me. One of you will come against me. And all of them are murmuring back and forth. Is it you? John, I know you a tricky little sucker. I mean, they're just going back and forth and trying to guess who the person is. And then one person stands up and says, am I the one, Lord? He replied. The one of you who just eaten from the bowl with me will betray me, for the Son of Man must die, as the scriptures declared long ago. But how terrible it will be for the one who betrays him. It would be far better for that man to have never been born. And Judas, the one who would betray Jesus, also asked, Rabbi, am I the one? And Jesus told him, you have said it. And as they were eating, Jesus took some bread and blessed it. Then he broke it in pieces and gave it to his disciples, saying, take this, eat it, for this is my body. Now, these verses can seem extremely obscure, but if we understand not only the simple, but the most impactful moment of Jesus' life right before he goes to the cross, I just find it so interesting that Jesus would sit at a table with the very man that would betray him for a bag of silver. I find it intriguing that Jesus is willing to overlook, and I have so many questions. How long did Jesus know that Judas was going to betray him? Was it the first year? Was it in the first couple of days, in the first hours? Did he live with this partner that he had as a friend, knowing that one day he would come and take Jesus out? But one of the things that always strike me so interesting is that Jesus was so irate when dealing with Peter, but he seemed to be so calm with dealing with Judas. And one seems a little bit harsher than the other. It almost seems like he dealt so incredibly harsh with Peter and he dealt so lightweight with Judas. And I continue to ask myself, why would Jesus be so angry at Peter, but not be equally, if not more angry at Judas? And it seems like his responses are uneven, unbalanced, and even unfair. And I've come to this conclusion. It may not seem so smart or eloquent, but the conclusion is this, is that there is some pain that we go through is actually a part of God's plan. Now, I'll say this again because some of you may feel that's contradictory to God being a loving God, God being a compassionate God. And God is all of those things. But there's something that God allows us to walk through and in that's actually a part of his plan that we see throughout so many scriptures and texts. Jesus reminds us that he would die this horrific death. And for you that are maybe new to the team, you're asking yourself, why would Jesus have to die? Based on the Old Testament, thousands of years ago, there was a system that was put into place in order to connect with God. And that system demanded that there would be sacrifice or blood to atone for our mistakes, to cover our mistakes, that God would not judge us, but he would acknowledge acknowledge our fallen nature, but he would also still look at us in relationship and still love us and still show compassion to us. And that sacrifice of animals and bulls and goats was no longer good enough to justify the transgressions, the level of evil and sin that had run rampant through our world. And our hands were definitely involved in that. And God not wanting to be separated from humanity based on the law that he instituted, but he knows that he is such a faithful king and such a good God that he is a fulfiller of his own word. He's not a man that he should lie, but he speaks truth. And because of his own word, he fulfills his truth. He fulfills the law that he was instituted by allowing his son to take our place. Because we are sinners and have fallen short of the grace and the glory of God, Jesus takes our place and he died on the cross. And it was such an horrific day that even the sun could not look at the bruised and broken body of Jesus. The sun stood still. It was such an incredible day. The Bible says that graves began to shake, and literally men and women came out of the graves and began to walk throughout the city. And people had recognized, people who were complete atheists that were far away from God, had one conclusion, that truly this was a righteous man. This was a holy man. This was a man belonging to God. And as Jesus makes that appointment, he heads into that assignment and he walks through all of this pain. It was inevitable for him to go through this kind of intense pain. Inevitable. And I can only think that somehow Peter was getting in the way of the plan of God, and Jesus had to walk through this pain in order to fulfill the plan of God in his life. The question I have for you this morning is this: what pain is a part of the plan? You see, God's plan is never void of pain, but not all pain is from God. And understanding the difference is what determines how things work together or things work against us. You see, the first thing that we have to understand is that pain is unavoidable, or some pain is avoidable, but some pain is inevitable. Some pain is avoidable, but some pain is inevitable. You see, in avoiding inevitable pain only prolongs the process. You know, the crazy thing about pain is that 1 out of 4 people in our world today live with chronic pain. This outweighs diabetes and cancer combined. That people live with chronic pain, whether it be a backache that they just kind of deal with, or something that's wrong with their leg, or something that's wrong with their shoulders or their neck, or a car accident that happened years ago. But people live with chronic pain. And here's the crazy thing is that if chronic pain goes on long enough and becomes unchecked, it actually creates more damage. We become desensitized to the pain that we're actually walking in. And I believe that as Jesus is walking through this moment of crucifixion, there was a plan and there was pain that was a part of that plan, but there was also pain that Jesus had to remove, that Jesus had to avoid in order for him to complete and to not be distracted by what was going to take him further away from the mission. You see, in our lives, there are areas of pain that is avoidable. There are areas where we fall down or we stumble or we compromise or we find ourselves involving in the wrong relationships that are toxic or chaotic. And those relationships, that pain is actually avoidable. And then there's some things that there is just pain that's just inevitable. There's some pain that we just have to walk through. And the reason why I'm saying that this is lethal is because I believe that there are so many people that are living with pain that has been bombarding their lives, that has actually surrounded them in such a way, and they live with this chronic anxiety and they do not know how to walk through it, so they just live with it. And I don't believe that God's called us to live in such a life where even if there's physical pain that is real, even if there's spiritual or emotional pain that is exhausting, that I don't believe that God has called us just to live with it, but I believe that God's called us to walk through it. And maybe right now that you have unchecked pain that you're avoiding dealing with. And sometimes there's 2 types of pain. There's the avoidable pain that we don't want to deal with, and then there's the inevitable pain. And there's those moments, maybe even in relationships, where if I just let this go and we don't bring this up or really talk about it and we avoid it, and if it goes on long enough, that pain becomes chronic and that pain creates more damage in our life that is actually lethal. There's areas in our hearts that people have wounded us, that people that have walked with us and have damaged us in such a way, and we've taken on that pain, and that pain has become a stigma and how we view and value ourselves. And we live with that chronic pain in such a way to where it begins to destroy us from the inside out. And I love this is because Jesus says there's some pain that is inevitable, but there's some pain that is avoidable. And if I know the difference, I'm able to walk through the pain that I may need to face in order to fulfill the mission and the plan and the purposes that God has on my life. And what you have to understand on a Sunday morning is that there is pain that is inevitable, and there's pain that has fixated itself and attached itself to you, and it could be either pushing you into your purpose or pulling you away from it. And God calls us to be stewards of the tragic moments of our lives, that we are responsible to our response in those moments. And Jesus models for us a healthy and holy response that as he walks through pain. You see, but when we walk through pain, we actually see God's plan. And I think this is so interesting because Jesus considered it more painful to avoid the cross rather than going through it. Listen to this. Jesus considered it more painful avoiding the cross, where he would stretch out his arms, he would die a horrific death, he would take on the 40 lashes upon his back, he would take on a crown of thorns. He felt like avoidance was more horrific than facing what was ahead of him. One of the things that I want you to understand that is lethal to your journey with Jesus is that there's areas of pain in our life that we choose to avoid dealing with. And it actually becomes chronic, becomes destructive. You see, the moment that we see change is this. Serious change happens when our disobedience is more painful than our faith. I'll say that again because it may sound a little tricky, but the point that I'm making is this. There are moments in our life that faith will cost us something, but staying where we are will cost us even more. That taking that step of faith of following God where he's leading you could be overwhelming, could be exhausting, could be painful, but it could be even more painful and even tragic, if not lethal, to stay where you are. You see, in my own life, there has been moments of tragedy and grief. And in this season, if I can just be so honest and just share a little bit, that all the things that have been happening in our world and in our church has overwhelmed my heart. And there's been moments where I even haven't had time to grieve. I haven't had time to really check on myself. And even the other day, Lonnie and I got together and we were just reminded, because we involved other people into the lethalness that was happening. We involved other people into this moment, and we got reminded that it is so important to recognize the pain that actually just we accumulate over time, and avoiding it by just continuing to busy ourselves rather than reconciling the pain that we've walked through and addressing it and verbalizing it and coming clean about it and how much it's hurt us and damaged us. So crucial, because when we bottle, when we contain, when we avoid, it becomes lethal. You see, let me just talk to the men for a moment, because I believe that God has made women the capacity of a woman is uncomparable. I mean, what other strength can you find in a person, a being that brings life into this world and walks with compassion and care? And I mean, there's nothing like a woman. And somehow women have this ability to experience great pain and can have, most of the time, have this ability to share that pain. And a lot of times, and I'm not being sexist, or I've just seen by my own experience, and that a lot of times when it comes to men and dealing with toxic and lethal pain, they continue to bottle it until it becomes overwhelming, until they find themselves in a fit of rage, or they find themselves driving down the road, going intense and literally chasing someone down. Why? It's because they've avoided dealing with that pain, and it hasn't become more painful to stay than to walk through. And God has put us on a journey, and I love seeing Jesus because Jesus had this accurate view of saying, it will cost me more to stay here and be comfortable than it will to walk into and walk through the pain that is in front of me. You see, I love this about God is because some pain works together for the plan. You see, some pain is avoidable. There are areas in our life where we actually involve ourselves in pain. We find ourselves in relationships that become tragic or toxic, and it's avoidable, and we get ourselves involved in those things. But there's another type of pain. There's an inevitable pain, a pain that we walk through. And just the other day, it was this moment that I was out with the kids, and we were leaving a friend's house, and my youngest, who unexpectedly was just being a kid, nothing crazy, not even being disobedient, just being a kid, and somehow tripped and fell. And in that process of falling, she fell and skinned her knee, and I was able to run there and pick her up and just love on her and encourage her and be there for her and, just do the whole thing of a parent. And then when we got home, she got quiet, but then as soon as she saw her mom, she just lost it all over again. And then I was like, man, this pain is really working together for your benefit. She got all of the Band-Aids and the whole family circled around her. I'm like, man, she's just eating this up. But there's certain pain that we walk through that actually is a part of the plan. And not that God is sadistic, not that God is with a magnifying glass in the sun and beating on us like little ants. God is a very compassionate God, and God understands that there are things that happen in our life, and God inserts himself into those moments with us, and he brings purpose to that lethal pain. You see, when we look at the lives of Peter and Judas, there's a difference. You see, the difference between Peter and Judas, one was trying to hurt the person, the other was trying to hinder the plan. You see, Judas was with Jesus from Jump Street. Jesus was with Judas as a disciple and walking with him. And Judas had, at some moment, actually, his heart began to grow cold to the things of God. He became more fixated with financial blessing and prosperity. He was total green leaf. This is the embodiment of green leaf was Judas. He gets so intoxicated with just the ministry and being a part of the ministry rather than ministering to Jesus himself, rather than ministering to God and being involved to give, to be a contributor. He just became a consumer in it, and he gets lost in that, and to the point where he says, I'm more willing to take this person out and hurt this person to get what I want. That's a mindset, a mentality of Judas. But Peter, who isn't as sadistic or as evil, his plan was simply, Jesus, I don't like your plan. I don't like where you are going. So I would rather stop you from moving forward and get in the way than to let you go through it. I would rather stop you right here, right now in this moment. I would rather keep things safe. If you continue to read, Peter goes up with Jesus to the Mount of Transfiguration, and he tells Jesus, let's just stay here. It's okay for us to just be comfortable. It's okay for us to just be relaxed and be cool because God is here. It's all good. Let's open the doors of the church and let's just be cute and comfortable. And Jesus is saying is this, I have a problem. Because even though you want to hurt me, there's one thing that you will not do. You will not hinder the plan of God from fully functioning in my life. That you can say things about me. You can berate me. You can call me out of my name. You can beat me. You can break me. You can lash out on me. But there's one thing you will not stop me from doing. You will not stop me from completing the plan of God that is on my life. Jesus was so focused on the mission that he was unwilling to allow pain to provoke him from staying where he is. That Jesus was so focused and fixated on what God called him to do that disobedience was not an option for him, because he realized that if I flake or fail right now in this moment, I'm only belaboring the inevitable. The cross is something that I'm gonna have to go through. And there's things in our life that we will have to walk through. Listen to me right now. There are areas of brokenness in your life that you've allowed to go unchecked. There are areas and areas with your mom or your dad that have hurt you and affected you. And that pain and the residue of that is still impacting your life. And it's not just hurting you, but it's obstructing the mission from being completed in your life. Because you're allowing that pain to hinder the plan. Jesus models for us. We're going to walk. We're going to experience pain. But it's a part of the plan. You see, if you look at different people in the Bible, and we look at these two men, Peter and Judas, why didn't Jesus check Judas the way he checked Peter? Because what Peter was trying to do was to avoid the pain Jesus is going to have to walk through. You look at different men and women in the Bible that experienced great pain, from Joseph to Job. If you're not familiar with the story of Joseph, is that he has this dream, this vision of what God called him to do, and his brothers hate him. So the brothers begin to attack Joseph, and unbeknownst to them, that as they were attacking Joseph, it was actually fulfilling the plan of God for his life, that there was hell and high waters that he had to walk through and swim through, and he had to go through dungeons and pits. He had to be blamed and accused for rape that he didn't commit, and all of the trials that he went through actually led him to this one final moment where it says in Genesis 50:20, as Joseph looks over his brothers that were literally causing him evil and harm, he says this to him. He says, "But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about." In order, another translation says, to accomplish, as it is this day, to save many people. You see, here's the thing, is that many times God will allow us to go through inevitable pain. And in that inevitable pain, there is a plan that God positions us to be able to leverage that pain to actually help others that are in traumatic experiences. I've said this before, where you experience attack, I believe that's what God calls you to have authority. Where you walk through that painful experience and it models, and if you use it and put that pain in its proper place, you can actually leverage that pain to help those that are fallen into the same trap, the same pain, the same trauma that you've gone through. You see, there's some pain that God allows in our life, and I call it planned pain. There's pain that works against the purposes of God, and then there's pain that works the purposes and the plans of God together. You see, some pain robs us of our joy. It paralyzes us. It creates an environment. Actually, it creates a perspective that seems that it's so difficult to move forward. It's impossible. That person, I will never forgive them. I'll never allow that person to experience the joy. I just want to see just tragedy happen to that person. And it brings paralysis. It brings chronic pain. And that chronic pain creates a spiritual nerve damage to where we become desensitized to the feeling of love and compassion. I think that's what's going on in our world right now. I think everything, even concerning Breonna Taylor and the outrage, the hurt that people are feeling, I think it needs to be addressed. I think spiritual leaders need to come out and say, what has happened and what is happening in our world, it's trauma. Some want to call it drama, but it's trauma. Because there are women that feel maybe a system or a government or communities have even marginalized them, and their life doesn't have value. And hear me out, I'm not trying to take a political turn by any means. What I'm saying is that even what we're experiencing as a community and communities of color, that literally this year has brought up so much. It's been inevitable pain. We can't avoid it any longer. It's inevitable. And so there's a process. Either we put pain in a lethal place and it begins to consume us and it begins to enrage us. It begins to entrap us, or we put pain in its proper place and we say, God, how is this going to all work together? How are you positioning us as a community and as a church to be an example of what it is to walk through tragedy and heartache and pain and frustration and exhaustion? God, how are you working these things out? And when you're in the middle of trauma, you don't always have the answers. But where you are is more painful to stay than it is to walk through. You see, I was thinking about this. I was thinking about missions being aborted. Because Jesus was so focused on accomplishing what God had planned in his life that missions get aborted all the time. But here's the reason why missions are aborted, whether that be a space shuttle being sent to explore galaxies, or whether that be to assassinate a criminal or a person that's overwhelming the world with evil. But missions are aborted when the conditions have deviated so far from the plan that the plan is no longer in reach, or the window of time is missed. You see, Jesus understood that if he were to allow Peter to obstruct God's plan, it would deviate in such a way that he would miss his window of time. And even though it would be so painful to walk through it, the pain was more preferable than staying where he was. That God even allowed Judas and orchestrated this man to be a part of the plan of God. Now, I don't understand it. On the surface, I wouldn't have done it that way. But if you look at the words of Jesus, he constantly says, it's part of the plan. The question I have for you this morning, TFH Oakland, is this. There's some pain in your life that has become so lethal. There are hurts that have become so lethal in your life that are actually robbing you and obstructing the plan of God being fulfilled in your life. And until that pain is dealt with, and many times that pain is dealt with when we come into community with others and we begin to expose that pain and we begin to dismantle that lie that we've convinced ourselves of. That's why it says, if you know the truth and the truth shall set you free, is because when we believe lies, it actually paralyzes us and it stops us from moving forward. It stops us from having those authentic relationships. It stops us from being vulnerable. And that pain, that unplanned pain, begins to rob us. But when we dismantle those lies and we put pain in its proper place, we start to look at that pain differently and we realize that could this pain be a part of my purpose and design, that God created me to use this pain to actually reach out to those that are experiencing the same trauma and to extend healing because what I've walked through. So you have to put pain in its proper place. I was reading this story and listening to it, and there was this woman, and I can't remember her name, but she went through this crazy car accident, and her leg was just brutally broken in multiple places, and her leg had actually was like 3 times its original size. And when she was rushed to the hospital after this crazy car accident, they told her that you should amputate this leg. He said it would be beneficial for you to amputate this leg. And this woman said, no, there's a 1% chance that I could recover. And she took that 1% chance. And she continued to be in the hospital for months until she was able to recover and put herself on crutches. And throughout this trauma and this chronic pain, her leg never got back to its original condition. And to the point where she was so exhausted by the chronic pain that she goes back to the doctor and she says, Doctor, I've done everything. Can you please just amputate this leg? I don't want to live with this any longer. And when the doctor grabbed a hold of her leg that was missing chunks of muscle and tendons, that leg that was marred and scarred, the doctor held that leg and looked at it as if it was a masterpiece. The doctor began to see all of the trauma that this woman had walked through, and that this actually told a story of her strength. And that woman said, after the doctor held my leg and looked at it not with disgust or disdain, but looked at it with love and looked at it as if it was a work of art, it changed my perspective. And I just hope that there's someone here this morning that is listening to this message, that your pain has brought too much paralysis in your life. And rather than just holding on, you would take that pain and you would place it on the table before God, the ultimate Jesus, the greatest physician. And he would show you the masterpiece, the plan that was always involved in the inevitable pain that you walk through. And even in the pain that was avoidable, God has this supernatural ability. And that's why it says that God can work everything that was meant for evil for good for those that love him. Why? Because God has this ability to take our pain and show how it's a part of his plan. But you have to put pain in its proper place, because pain unchecked is lethal. It will take you out. As a pastor, as a leader, I'm not exempt from this. There are things that I constantly have to do. There's things in our family and in my marriage that I constantly have to do to make sure that pain doesn't take me out. And this morning, is pain in its proper place? Has there been unplanned pain that you weren't expecting, that has just hit your life and bombarded you in such a way? Sometimes it's like, I don't know if I can even worship. I don't even feel like praying. I don't even want to go to church. I can't go to church, but if I could go to church, I wouldn't even go to church. Why? Because this pain has become so lethal. This morning, I want to pray for you. And I want to encourage you. Don't walk through that pain alone. God never intended for that pain to be dealt with in isolation. But if that's you and you say, Pastor Jules, there's some pain that's obstructing the plans of God in my life, and I've avoided it for too long and it's become chronic, I want you to pray this simple prayer. Just close your eyes with me. But Father, I pray for those right now that tragedy, unexpected pain has hit their home, hit their lives. Even the trajectory of their future, where they thought, man, I would be in this job by now. I would be here by now. And because of the circumstances, it's just creating this pain where we feel like we can't move forward. But God, I know that you are ultimately the greatest orchestrator. And even though there may be people that have hurt us or wounded us, that have gotten in the way or have taken something away from us, Lord, or we're just in a place of loss, in deficit, you have the supernatural ability to work all things that were created for evil and turn it around for good. And God, I'm not asking that you would just extract pain, but Lord, this morning I'm asking you, God, give us the godly perspective of what it looks like to walk through this pain. Lord, that you would bring the right people and help our community of believers to walk through this season where tragedy and misfortune and chaos and doubt and fear would try to stop us from moving forward in you. Lord, that you are a friend that walks closer than a brother. And we pray, Lord, that you would bring comfort to our hearts. Lord, I pray that forgiveness and mercy would be able to flow from this house. And we would put the lethal pain that has gone unchecked into the hands of the greatest physician and see the way that you see our pain, God. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in and watching and believing that God can be involved in every area of our lives. As we talk about pain that is lethal, again, we want to encourage you. We're here for community. And we don't want you to walk through this season alone. But we would love for you to engage in our small groups and begin to grow a little bit more. And maybe you're new to this whole thing of just walking with God, or it starts with relationship. And we would love to be able to connect with you in that lobby and just tell you a little bit about how you can become more involved and what does it mean to even follow God and what does it look like to live life in community, even in this season. But we love you guys and we want to walk with you. And thank you so much. If there's anything that we can do for you to serve you in any way, please let us know. Please jump into the lobby. We'd love to spend some time with you. But thank you so much for joining us. And we will see you guys next week for some exciting new things that are coming in to TFH Oakland. God bless you guys.
Hello again. Wasn't sermon awesome? Well, thank you so much for tuning in once again. And don't forget, right now, click the link below and you can join us at the lobby. And I can't wait to meet you all. Bye.